So, welcome.
Thank you.
How you been, Vanessa?
I've been good. I've been in a lot of transition.
Yeah?
Yeah. So I quit my job. I decided that I want to do freelance and contract work starting 2020. So I quit my job December 12th. And now I'm just enjoying the holidays. And then come January, I'm traveling. So
That's dope, man.
So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I noticed maybe through your social media, how your transformation has been very public,
Mm-hmm.
It's been very known. And Lizette was actually the one who put me on. She was like, yeah, you need to, have you followed Vanessa? I was like, yeah, I followed her. I saw one post that you put, and I was like, it seemed like she's on a thing. She's like, no, she's on a real journey. She's like, it's really cool. I've been following her, and she's like, everything she's been posting has just been so uplifting and positive. She's like, I think you should consider having her on.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, yo, dope, for sure, check it out. And then I went through all your posts, and I was like, whoa, Vanessa's on a real journey.
Yeah.
It was really dope to see that. And what, I guess, even your name on Instagram, it's, what is
Latina pero American.
Latina pero American.
Mm-hmm.
What inspired that?
So, it came from a lot of there's a saying in Spanish, it's ni de aquí, ni de allá.
Yeah.
And so growing up, I just felt so much, I never had my culture. My parents moved to the States. They were undocumented. They had to live their life in the shadows. They had to assimilate the life of Americans. And so essentially we grew up in that, and knowing this better life and everything that they came for, the American dream.
Right.
But we missed out so much on the culture aspect of it, as far as oh, this is what we do for the holidays. All those things that make a Mexican as far as our culture, the celebrations, the colors, the music, all of that stuff we were never allowed to do in our lives. So when I was coming up with a name for my brand and what I wanted to envision and who I am, I knew that I wanted it to be Latino based, because my dream is always pouring back into my people.
Right.
And I'm a huge fixer, so I'm I needed to channel how to fix shit
Right.
on my own in a healthy way. So I was very focused on the Latino community. And so when I started to try to engage with a lot of the Latino community, a lot of the pushback that I would get was, you don't get it because you're not like us. You're from here.
You're American.
And I'm yeah, I grew up here. My parents, I was born here, and I grew up with a citizenship.
Right.
I grew up with my papers. But at the same time, my parents didn't grow up with that privilege or didn't have that privilege as adults,
Right.
and us being children and being able to show us everything, because they were so busy trying to hide who they were, because they wanted to be okay and stay in the States and
Right.
blend in and all these things. And so it wasn't until that I got older that I started to feel when people would be you're not Mexican enough, or you're too Mexican, or you're too whitewashed, or you're,
Right.
all these different things. And I'm what does that even mean? What does
Right.
that even mean, And now that I'm an adult, now that I've gone through so much healing and transformation, I'm oh my gosh, whitewashed is such a fucked up concept, And for me, it's yeah, I was whitewashed, but at the end of the day, forever, my intentions have always been so pure with my people. And just giving back and educating and advocating, because I feel a lot of the movements that we've seen, Black Lives Matter and things like that, have been because a lot of the children have gotten loud.
Right.
Now we're in a time where we're in a very heavy political climate, and now as adults we're able to talk, because a lot of us have the privilege of being citizens versus our parents, and it's what better opportunity than that in itself to be able to advocate for our people.
Right.
For so long I held my parents' secret as a child for so many years, and those secrets and everything that you teach your child to hide and do and to lie about, all of that stuff comes up as them as an adult, you know, like every experience that every person has ever had makes them who they are as an adult.
Right.
So, you know, to be able to, for me to like look back and understand like why my parents hid my culture, like that's where my empathy comes in. That's where like I'm able to see their perspective and why they did it. And so now I'm like, you know what, Latino pero American, because I grew up here. I am Latina. My parents are Mexican, but I grew up here. And so I'm also from here. Like, you know, like I'm in these systems, but I'm in these systems now to change them. I'm in these systems now to advocate. I stayed in higher ed because I found a passion there with my Latino people, and being able to help and being able to advocate or able to like give guidance. Like, you know, I usually get like people at my job, like if they're Mexican and they speak to me in Spanish, I'll speak to them in Spanish, and that's like the most Spanish I get at my job, you know.
Right.
And so the minute they realize that I know Spanish, they start asking me all kinds of questions.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like, okay, well, what do I do about this?
Yeah.
Or
so they open up.
Yeah, my child's struggling with this. How can I fix it? How do I do this? How to do it? You know, and it ends up being like a 30-minute session of me like guiding them throughout the school to show them where to go, what to do next. And it's very eye-opening that like the systems aren't made for Latino people.
Right.
Because we live in such an oppressed society. And so my name came from like being able to have the privilege of growing up here and being here and knowing what it is to be an American, quote unquote, obviously, you know, what they consider an American, but also being able to relate to my people because my parents came from nothing, you know, made their careers, did whatever it is that they do, and then now they're where they're at. But not everyone has the privilege of being able to say and feel that they made it.
Right.
And that's the other thing. So my idea with Latino pero American was that I can advocate for other Latinos. I can advocate for the people that are from here that are trying to make it, but they don't know how, because I was the first of four, you know, navigating school systems, navigating whatever it is that adulthood is supposed to be, you know. And so if I can offer guidance to people who can relate to my story, can relate to who I am, then that's where I'm like, you know what, that was a lot of like where my brand came from and why I chose those names, because a lot of people think it's controversial because it's Pero American, but they don't understand the aspect and how much we put away when we have to live here.
Yeah, you know? And that's real because, I mean, a lot of people who grow up with parents that are undocumented, you have to live that, you know, because it's a constant fear, I think, that our parents have. Like, if they find out, you know, maybe they'll come knocking on our door. And, you know, because you hear all these things on the news all the time, so you don't really know. And then you also, but, you know, I don't think they realize that they put it on us as kids. And so now you walk around with that. And you kind of have to hide, like, in the shadows a little bit of, like, oh, no, you know, you avoid those questions as much as possible because you don't want to put them in a situation where then what? You know, they take your parents, and then what do you do as a kid?
Exactly,
and it's this fear that they kind of put on. So, like, when did that transformation happen, or was that something you had already?
So I think 2019 was like my darkest year. My darkest year meaning like I struggled with my depression so heavily that I was like missing work, I was missing social events, I was missing out on everything because I was so stuck in my own world. Like I couldn't physically get out of bed every day, like I couldn't physically be at my job every day, like all of these things. And it was always based around a lot of the stuff that I had gone through in my life. And so when 2018 was my hardest year. 2019, excuse me. Yeah, 2019 was this year. And so I'm like, come January, I'm going to go hard. I'm going to do self-care. I'm going to go to therapy. I'm going to do all these things to like fix myself, you know? So 2020 came, I started going back to therapy. I started doing all these things to like get better and to be able to like cope with like my depression and so I ended up this year getting diagnosed with PTSD, which was, it sounds super crazy and super like, oh my god, PTSD, a lot of the stigma with PTSD is that it's for veterans only. You know, but what people don't realize is that PTSD just has to do with like something traumatic that has happened in your life, whether you feel it's significant or not, you know. And so being able to get a diagnosis and just being able to like learn coping skills for that, because PTSD comes with like a lot of depression.
Shit.
And so learning to cope with all of that stuff, just it gives you more direction, because then once, like for me at this point in time, I can be like, I'm just going through a depression episode. I don't know when it's going to be over, but I know it's going to end. You know, that's where I'm at now. Last year, I was like, not even thinking like, this is depression. This is what I'm going through, you know?
Figured it was normal?
Yeah, I just figured it was like, this is, I'm just broken, you know?
I got you.
Is where I was like, I'm just broken. Like, this is like my broken life. Like, I'm just a sad person. Like, I didn't talk to my parents or my family for a long time because I needed to know who I was first. And so a lot of it had to do with like the turmoil and the guilt of like shutting them out from my life, because the amount of people that would be like, oh my gosh, you don't talk to your mom. And I'm like, do you know how much stuff I went through with my mom? Like, if you would have known, you probably wouldn't be asking me, you know? And at the end of the day, it's like she's not healed herself, you know? And a lot of the times hurt people. And it sounds so cliche and so cheesy, but it's so true.
No, it's real.
It's so true, because
real.
when someone is broken, like, I think about all of the issues that I've had throughout my life as far as like self-esteem, self-confidence, my mental health. It has always stemmed around a lot of the stuff that I grew up with and the environments that I was in and the things that we went through, because, you know, my parents were undocumented. My parents did struggle. My parents, you know, couldn't just like, when I went to college for financial aid, it was like, oh, they can't just pull out loans for me, you know, they don't have papers, I can't do that. You know, even if it was a guaranteed loan. And which was a lot of my issues in college, was that people were like, it's a guaranteed loan, you just need to apply. And I'm like, my parents don't have papers, I can't apply, you don't understand, you know. And they were like, oh, well then there's nothing we could do for you. You know, and it's like being in an education system where you're supposed to thrive, where you're supposed to move forward, where that's my ticket for moving my family forward. You know, and all of this like stuff that you're holding, like all of this like pressure, you know, of like to do well, to move forward, to be the ticket, you know, to get your family.
Gotta get it done.
Exactly. And having all this pressure on top of trauma, on top of unhealed anything, because I was like at the point where like I would go and get drunk and have the best time of my life, but then the next day I also didn't remember what was going on. I also had like, you know, like nights where it was like you were like crying because of your mom and blah blah blah, and it was like, you know what, it's because I'm not working on any of this, and everything that I was struggling with was coming out when I was drinking. And that's when I was like, oh shit, you know, let me take a step back. What do I need to do? Because obviously something's not working. So then 2019 came, and I was like, instead of a New Year's resolution, I'm making myself a self-care plan, and I'm doing it. And so all of 2019 I feel like has been like 30 years like packed into 1 year. Because I've been working on my mental health, I've been working on like reinventing who I am, and like all of these different areas that I know I have strengths in and that I've been working on, and just like seeing my own value in the workplace and things like that. And honestly, it's not until like you really get to know yourself that you're able to have direction. And I think that's a lot of the problem with a lot of people who, you know, struggle with direction and struggle with moving forward, is that they don't know where to go next.
It feels super good to come home and to be able to like connect with people that I've, you know, grew up with or that I've knew, and so it feels good.
It's been a long time.
I don't know, whichever. I'm like, I've known you since high school, so I'm like,
I know.
cool.
All right. Thank you.